Welcome back. Now, in the election which is being described as wide open, the party which beat Labour into third place in last year's European elections is seeking to repeat its success at the polls this time. The UK Independence Party, or UKIP, is fielding 550 candidates, including Nigel Farage, who has stood down as a Euro MP to fight for a Westminster seat. We'll be speaking to him in a moment. Well, the party's principal aim is withdrawing from the European Union, the very reason it was founded 17 years ago. UKIP also pledges to end what it calls uncontrolled mass immigration and impose a 5-year freeze on new immigrants settling here. The party would ban the burqa and veiled niqab in public and some private buildings. On the economy, it wants a 31% flat rate of income tax and the abolition of national insurance, and it wants proportional representation for national and local elections. Well, I spoke to Nigel Farage a short time ago. If UKIP won the election, who'd be Prime Minister?
Well, that's a good question. Lord Pearson is the leader of the party. But look, let's be realistic. UKIP is not going to win the general election. But what we are going to do is we're going to get a massively increased share of the vote from the last general election. And we're going to have constituencies in which we've got a chance of getting our first people elected to the House of Commons. OK. Obviously, you would have a much bigger say in Britain if there was electoral reform. Shouldn't you be a Liberal Democrat this election? Well, I mean, you're right, of course, and if you look at the last national election, it was the European elections of last year, and UKIP came second across the entire United Kingdom, which was an amazing achievement. All that is holding together the current Conservative and Labour parties is the first-past-the-post system, and I think the whole thing is crying out for electoral reform, and that's the one upside. If we get a hung parliament, the next general election will be very different indeed.
So shouldn't you tell your supporters to vote Liberal Democrat?
No, we can't do that because the Liberal Democrats are even worse, as we see it, than Labour and the Conservatives.
But you agree with them on lots of things, don't you? I mean, you agree with them on raising the tax threshold. They want to raise it to 10,000. You want to raise it to something like that. You agree with them on electoral reform.
To be fair, we were the first people to say, raise the tax threshold, and Vince Cable agreed with us and went along with that policy. But we fundamentally disagree with the Lib Dems on immigration. I mean, they want to have an amnesty for illegal immigrants, which would send a message to the rest of the world, look, come on down, everything's easy. And, of course, the Lib Dems are fanatically pro the European Union, whereas what UKIP says is let's trade with Europe, let's be friendly with Europe, but for goodness sake, let's make our own laws.
Suppose you got in and... Yep. It was a hung parliament, and every seat, every vote in the House of Commons mattered in terms of getting through a Queen's speech. What would be the price of your support? Which would be your one issue?
The price of my support would be that the British people have a full, free and fair referendum so that they can decide their future. After all, 75% of our laws that are made every year are now made by the institutions of the European Union. We want a referendum, and we're confident if we had that referendum, the British people would opt for a trade deal with the EU, but for making our own laws in our own country.
That's it. That's your single most important issue.
Well, I think given that it's 75% of our legislation, given that the Lisbon Treaty has gone through and that we now have an EU foreign minister...
That's a very questionable claim, isn't it, the 75% of legislation number? Well, you made it up, didn't you? You made it up as a number.
Anybody that questions our 75% figure should look at Germany, where the former president of Germany, Mr. Herzog, conducted a survey over the last 10 years in Germany, and his figure was that 84% of German laws in the last 10 years had come from Brussels.
So you guessed 75, didn't you? It's a pretty arbitrary guess.
No, it's not a guess. It's not a guess. That is an estimate. That's our estimate. And even the government
between
themselves...
an estimate and a guess?
Well, an estimate is something that you do through research. The difficulty is, do you include local traffic regulations or don't you? Now, even when pressured, the government in the House of Lords have responded that over half our laws now emanate from Brussels. If the government's admitting to that, it makes our 75% figure look pretty good.
Nigel Farage from UKIP.